So this one will be fun. We're going to play with a lot more color in this one and some blending of those colors. Now this one does not have a straight horizon line. It's more of a curve here with all these mountains in the background, and then it kind of comes up like that. And then it's got additional horizon lines. We've got a mountain that kind of comes down like this into this river valley right here, and another mountain that comes down like that. Alright, so this one kind of comes down further. Alright, so let's get started. We're going to start in the back and work our way forward. We are going to start with some yellow. So we're going to take a bright, 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 bright yellow. And we're going to hit this top corner here. And I'm going to add some in and then just spread it out. You don't need a bunch of it. If you have a ton of color, then it'll get kind of muddy when you mix it together. Oh no, we're going to put some yellow down here too. Alright, now we're going to take some red and we're going to mix it in with a little bit of the orange and the white so that we can have kind of a light pinkish. We're going to take that and put that along here, and we're going to put that up here. I actually kind of would like to have more orange in this, so I'm going to take that and spread it out a little bit. I'm going to take a little dab of orange and add that over the top and spread that in. Now don't forget, you guys can pause this at any time if you want to take a second and catch up. And so then as the orange meets this yellow, it's going to create that kind of burnt yellow, kind of a little bit brighter than the yellow umber we were using last time. Feel free to play with it. Blend the colors together. Have some fun with it. And I'm going to take some of this purple and put it in the center right here. And it kind of makes a little bit of a zigzag going down like this. Alright. And I'm going to add a little bit more orange in here because you've got a lot darker shades kind of coming out, hitting these clouds here because it's casting a shadow from the sun. So we're going to put some of that kind of spreading out from the center here. just like that. Go ahead and add some water and blot it out a little bit so that it's a little bit more blended. You don't want to blend it out too much though, because then you'll lose the darkness in those lines there. But you don't want to have super strong lines in the sky. So we had talked before about how color bleeds, so if you have a dab of color on there and you put water, it kind of grabs it and pulls it out. So that's all that I'm doing right here, is I'm kind of forcing it to bleed because I want it to in this case. And then there is a little bit of purple over here too, so I'm going to add a little bit of purple on this edge over here. Alright, so now these back mountains are mostly kind of a blue-violet, so I'm going to start with a blue here, and I'm going to follow these mountainscapes and just create that first line. Whoop! There's some of that bleeding we were talking about, a little too much in that case, but that's okay. Give it a sec to dry out. And then we'll just grab it and pull it down, and we'll turn that into a mountain too. And that's fine. Doesn't have to be exactly like the picture. Now remember, there's not a lot of straight lines in nature, so go ahead and shake your brush a little bit as you're doing it. Make it kind of zigzagged lines here. Some texture. Then we're going to grab our purple, our violet. We're going to go kind of over the top, especially over on the edges here. Now, because of how many fun colors are in here, I'm going to make the colors more extreme than they are in the picture because I want to kind of play with that. You can choose if you want it to look more close to the picture or a little bit more stylistic. So right now I'm going with stylistic and letting the colors kind of pop just for fun. So just grab that and kind of spread it along here. Now the center part here where the river is going to come through, I'm going to kind of lighten that up because that's going to have more other colors over it and I don't want it to be overpowered by that purple. So all I'm doing is adding water and kind of pushing the color away and back up into these mountains. Now we're getting a lot of orange light coming from right here, so we're going to grab some of that, and when the orange, like orange or yellow, hits this blue and purple, it's going to start to turn kind of brown, and that's fine, but you don't want to blend it too much or it'll turn into a really muddy brown. So the spots that turn brown, if there's a little bit, is going to be totally fine, but if there's a lot, then it'll start to look kind of odd. So I'm just going to kind of grab that, cast it over like that, and I'm making sure to follow the pattern that that sun goes, so almost like a circular pattern of spikes coming out here. Alright, and then rather than fully blending, I'm going to bleed it again. So I'm going to dab over. Just add some water and let it kind of do its own thing there. Now, when you see mountains in the distance, they're going to be darker up on top and kind of lighter down at the bottom, and that's mostly just kind of like the atmosphere showing through. So we're going to bring this color from here and we're going to fade it out just a bit. So down here it's going to be a lot more because I'm going to add to this, but when you get to here you don't want to fade it too much. So just kind of dab it up like that. Now this mountain is coming down this way, so I'm going to kind of dab it up so that it's faded out, and then the top of this mountain is less faded out so that you can see the two. Just adding in that atmosphere here. Now this one over here is going to have some atmosphere down at the bottom like this. Since this one has less of that orange, I can blend it a little bit more. It won't be so bad. Same thing with this one here. Just kind of blend out this bottom part here. But make sure this top line right here stays kind of dark. Just like that. So now we're going to take some yellow and we're going to add that, and we're going to kind of do a sweeping side by side like this so that it follows that kind of horizon line, because this is kind of flat ground at the center here, so we want it to come up like that. We want to make sure that we keep that looking flat in this image. And we can kind of bring it up a little bit here. Alright, so now I'm going to leave that for a little bit because I don't want to add too much more to it while it's still really wet. So I'm going to do some of these mountains right here. And I'm going to start with a yellow, just in this middle bit right here, because there's a fair amount of kind of yellow and orange, probably dirt or shorter plants like shrubs and stuff right here. So and I know that I am moving rather quickly, but like I said, you can pause at any time. I don't want the videos to be super long, but you can always pause and take as much time as you need. And if you have any questions, you can definitely send us questions. Alright, so then I'm going to switch to green. Now my green is really like a dark green, so I'm going to mix my green with yellow because I want it to be more like a lime green. I'm going to start with that. We're going to do some, I don't want it to be super smooth, so we're going to do some kind of dabbing of the color on there. I want it to be spread out, but I want there to be spots that are darker and spots that are lighter right from the beginning here. I'm just continuing to add water and spread it around here. And grab some more paint because I need some more down here. Go across that. Grab some water, spread that up. And then this line right here is going to be a brighter green. Kind of coming up like that. And I'm going to grab some darker green. Now before I do the rest of this, I'm actually going to add in some of that darker green along here. And I will end up spreading that out a little bit more, but for right now I'm just going to let that sit there. And then I'm going to put some along here and do a similar thing to what I was doing right here. Just spread it out. Grab some more color, put some dark down here. Grab some water, spread it out. And as it hits the yellow, it'll kind of start to turn into that lime or green again, and that is fine. So part of the reason that we are doing this is because when we start putting grass and trees and stuff on, we don't want to have to cover every little section of it, and we don't want white to necessarily show through in between all the little blades of grass and all the trees. So we want to have these background colors down, but it doesn't need to be super detailed right away. This spot right here is going to have a lot of trees, so I'm just going to spread the color. I'm a little less worried about texture there. Alright, now this back mountain here is going to be kind of an orange brown, so I'm going to start with some orange. That. And I'm going to take some brown, and I am going to dab over it very lightly so that you get little spots. Just like that. And then I'm going to grab it, kind of bring it down into this green here. Alright. Now I'm going to grab some blue. There are spots that look almost like a dark brown, black, and rather than doing that, I'm going to use blue because of how much blue and purple there is in here. I think it'll match a lot nicer. So we're going to take the blue and kind of bring it up like this, because we've got a curve in this riverbed here. So we're gonna add the ground on one side here. Gonna add some right here. And bring this up into that green a little bit here. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. And this is much thicker color that I'm using here. I'm not spreading it out as much because I want it to be that dark, dark blue. Now, because the mountain is sloped this way, I'm going to try and follow that slope with my dabbing so that it keeps that shape. I'm going to bring some of this down. And when we add more texture to this mountain with some more green later, we'll blend it in with this blue and it'll look real slick. Add some little bits in here so that you get some kind of darks and lights going. Alright, now this river spot here, we're going to take some white and we want it to be pretty thick. So since I'm using dry, I'm going to mix it quite a bit to make sure there's a lot of pigment in there, lots of color. If you're using wet watercolors, it won't be nearly as hard. But we're just going to very lightly put that river in here. And this is easier with a pointed brush rather than a flat brush, but you can use just the very, very edge if you only have one kind of brush. Just like that. Does kind of dab up a little bit there. And now I'm going to take a little bit of green because there is a little bit kind of right there. Alright. So now we're going to add texture into this mountain right here. So we're going to take green, and we want lots of pigment on that, so I'm going to mix that in real good because I want it to be a nice dark green. And because this one is still farther away, it's mostly going to be dabbing again. I'm going to take some blue and I'm actually going to mix it into the green so that I can get like a deep forest green going on there. And especially with the plants that are kind of coming up the edges here, we're going to dab along like so. Remember to follow the slope that you see happening on the mountain itself. Right, and then I'm going to use some more of the same green kind of over in this corner here because it's a nice dark over here. But I'm actually going to probably start switching to doing kind of a back and forth, up and down motion like this. So it's going to be a little bit more like grass. And then we've also got all along here are going to be trees. So we're going to take some more of that dark green, so I'm going to mix that blue in there again. And I'm going to start at the top here, and because they're pine trees, I'm just going to go like that. Just wiggle it down. You can also start at the top, kind of go down like that, and then change it to side by side, side to side like this. Do little peaks sneaking out behind it. And the trees are a little bit shorter here, it looks like. I'm just going to mark some lines here for trees and just kind of follow them up with some texture. Alright, now I am going to grab some white here and I'm going to mix that in with the green to lighten that up. And then I'm going to go over on the tops of these trees and just hit these little peaks here. Doesn't have to be all of them, just a few catching the light here. And you can do a little bit of the branches here too if you want up on top. And then I am going to take my yellow and mix it in with my green. And what we're doing is we're making a whole bunch of different shades of green, because if you look at a tree, it's not just one shade of green, right? We're just going to add in some horizontal lines here on some of these trees. Just following those branches. Alright, and I'm going to need more of this yellow-green for up front here, because we've got some kind of leafy plants up front here, right? So I'm going to dab it, but I want to dab it where there's some larger leaves happening here. And all I'm doing is the leaves on this plant. That is it. Just like so. And then we are going to grab some light green. Add a little bit more layer into this grass right here. And remember, we learned how to do grass last time. And it helps if you either take some of the paint off of your brush and then spread some of this, or put paint on your brush but then leave your brush pretty dry. That helps a lot with creating those little wispies. And I'm going to add some over on the other side here too. Alright, and then I'm going to take a darker green here, and we're going to add in some bushes. Just like so. And we're going to kind of branch off into some more trees right here. And I'm actually going to grab some of the color from behind and pull it down to spread it through these trees, because then that will cut into the trees up above and it'll make it so that they look like they're in front. And do the same thing right about here. Grab the color from up above and spread it out like a pine tree. Like that. And add some more bushes kind of coming down the slope. So we're just basically adding some dark patches on here. kind of tree right here, and this is less of a pine tree, more of a I think it's a coniferous tree. I think deciduous trees are the pine trees. I don't know. I don't remember. I'd have to double check. It's been a while. We'll learn some of that when we go on our nature walks. Alright, so then I'm going to take some of this yellow green again. And I'm mixing some more of mine. I'm going to add that in here. Let some kind of come out along the edges here. I'm going to add a little bit of the, some of these so that it looks more like little branches. Add some little dots along here because then it looks like it's catching the light. And then I'm going to take some dark brown. I'm going to add a little bit in the center of this, kind of like branches coming out here. I'm gonna add some to the bottoms of these. Cast in some shadows, adding some up front here. And the reason I'm using brown instead of black is to kind of lighten up the foreground, which is what's closer to you. The background further back is going to have darker shadows to it. And so I'm using the brown to accentuate the ones that are closer. Alright, and then when I start to run out of paint, which I'm not quite there yet, but when I start to run out of paint on this brush, I'm going to use the dry brush to add some texture on the ground. But you don't want to do that until the brush is a little bit on the dry side, because otherwise it'll look a little too thick. I'm going to add branches in this plant here. You just want them to be little itty bitty thin lines, and you don't have to connect every single leaf, but you want it to kind of spread between all the different directions that the leaves go, and then kind of come to a center. Or potentially two, if you decide that you want it to be two plants. Like, I'll just do that for sake of argument here. Alright, and then I'm going to add some up here, because this needs to have a lot more shadow down below. And then as I start to run out, I can use that dry brush to add some more shadows. I'm going to add some back here on the underside of most of these trees. And then when it's real dry, you can kind of flatten it down, add texture. And it'll kind of catch the texture of the paper itself. And then I'm going to grab some more paint. Add some shadows in the grass over here. Careful not to completely encompass your little plant here. Alright, now there's going to be some larger trees along here, so I'm going to grab that brown and I'm going to put some tree trunks kind of coming up so that I can map out where I want my trees. I'm going to mostly follow this, but I'm going to bring them out a little bit because I want this guy to come out a little bit more. Alright. Now I'm going to wipe off most of the moisture on my brush, but keep that brown on there. And I am going to add some more lines. Just like before with this guy over here, it doesn't need to be exact, but I'm going to add branches kind of coming off. Now these are not pine trees, these are these other kinds of trees. They're the, did we say they were coniferous? These ones are going to have branches that kind of curl a little more, so basically they're trees with leaves, not with pines, not with needles. So we're going to do that, and then we are going to grab some dark green. We're going to do something similar to what we did down over here. We're just going to tap, 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 tap. But make sure you leave gaps because you want to be able to see the sky and the mountains behind it. So, tap, 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 tap. And if you feel like adding another one over here, you can. Just make sure you don't lose too much of your background here. But sometimes it's fun to add things into the foreground, and we'll learn a little bit more about that in a later video. We're going to have the leaves kind of thicker down in the middle here, and they thin out up on top. So this is going to be thick leaves and then thinner up on top. So you won't really be able to see through the trees down here. That's why I wasn't too worried about that background texture, but we still want the color because we don't want to have to coat everything in paint. We want there to be color behind it. So now I'm gonna take brown, but I'm gonna take brown and kind of wipe it off as much as possible so it's a little bit on the drier side. And I'm going to add on some of the leaves. Doesn't have to be all of them. You don't want there to be too much brown. That's just so that we have some shadows in those leaves. And we want to start with the shadows because then when we put a nice bright green over it right now, we want that to be more dominant than the shadows. If we do the shadows after, then we're going to end up with some with a lot of brown in it. So I'm making a really bright yellow green, like a lime green. And I'm adding in some nice bright foliage. Big bright leaves. You want them to be even brighter at the top than they are at the bottom here. And then what you can do is you can take this lime green and mix it in with some white. Which I already had a little bit of green in my white, so it ended up being a little bit more of a blue-green, which is fine. The idea is to make it really kind of pastel-y, and you can put that over it too, especially up on top where it's catching that light. Lots of different shades of green. And then I am going to take some blue and mix that in with my green again to make a really, really dark green that isn't quite black. If you use too much black in your paintings, it'll actually kind of flatten them out. So you want to use colors that are close but not quite black if you can help it. I'm going to add some of that down here where these leaves are thicker, because there's going to be a lot more shadows down here. And I'm purposefully not going to bring it out there. I only want it down in this shadow. Alright, now it's up to you if you want to add clouds or not. We can do what we did last time with some of these wispy clouds and kind of take out color along here. Sometimes when I make skies, I decide that I like the sky enough that I don't want there to be clouds. I want just the colors, and that is fine either way. Or you can take some dark, which I'm actually going to use dark blue again. And I'm going to dab it along here to make some of those wispy clouds. And then I'm going to put some purple over it. And just kind of keep bringing it up because that's the shape of these clouds. Just like so. And then I'm going to take some white, and I've made a bit of a mess of my white, so I'm going to kind of wipe it off first here. I should just add some water and take a tissue or a paper towel and just Swipe that top layer of color off, and then you've got some nice clean white underneath. So take some white. I'm going to put some white up at the top of these clouds. Just like so. I'm going to add some white into my little wispies over here. And then I'm going to add some white clouds kind of along here. And I'm going to take a very, very small amount of purple on a drier brush, and I'm just going to put some little undertones to these clouds because I kind of like the purple in there, which is to be expected since that is my favorite color. I will add purple to anything if I can help it. And then I'm going to take a little bit of water and I'm going to bleed that purple a little bit. Just like so. So that it's less dots and it spreads out a little bit more. Well, my water's kind of dirty, so I don't know what color this will end up. Generally, you should clean your water before you do this, but I'm feeling experimental, so we'll see what it looks like when it's all dry. Alright, there we are.